Overseas travel ban on former Minister Basil Rajapaksa lifted by the Mathura Magistrate Court. Interim committee report on the Mahara prison unrest handed over to the Minister of Justice. Stop the oppression. Samagi Jana Balawegaya launches silent protest opposite the Presidential Secretariat. Ordinary level examination to be held from the 1st of March to the 11th of March. Victoria Reservoir will not be affected by the tremors. Engineer in charge of the reservoir certifies.
Main sponsor.
Good evening, this is Primetime News and on to your lead story tonight. The case filed at the Colombo District Court by George Stewart Health Private Limited against MTV Channel Private Limited was taken up at the Judge's Chamber today.
Making submissions on behalf of the defendant MTV Channel Private Limited, President's Counsel Udita Igalahewa made submissions that the ex parte enjoining order that was issued on the 24th of November 2020 must be vacated as 1. Court was misled and facts misrepresented by the plaintiff. 2. Material facts were suppressed. 3. Parties essential to the action have not been named as parties to the action, resulting in non-joinder, and the enjoining order was maliciously obtained. Counsel for the defendant also demonstrated the surreptitious manner in which the letter of demand sent by the plaintiff was backdated and only sent to the defendant through a courier service on the 23rd of November at 8:37 a.m. and was delivered to the defendant only on the 24th of November at 4 p.m. That's 1 day after action was filed and an enjoining order ex parte obtained by the plaintiff. The counsel also made submissions that the news reports by Newsfirst were not defamatory to the plaintiff and that what was reported were statements made by various parliamentarians in Parliament and at various public press conferences. Further, the council also made submissions that the chairman of George Stewart Health Private Limited, Dilip Jayavira, must be named as a necessary party to the case, as he is also the chairman of Derana television channel, who is now attempting to allege that he has been defamed by hiding behind this case. The council also said the affidavit of the plaintiff company contained untruthful statements and misled courts, and as per the Civil Procedure Code, is an offence to lie on oath. The council also drew reference to the freedom of expression and the right to information as enshrined in the Constitution and the duty of media organizations to report facts to the people. Therefore, the counsel for the defendant submitted that the whole action is malicious, and he further submitted that no proper cause of action has arisen for the plaintiff against the defendant. In response, President's Counsel Romesh De Silva, appearing for the plaintiff, said that it is not mandatory to send a letter of demand in regard to defamation cases, and furthermore, he said that in the plaint, sufficient evidence had been set out to prove that the defendant company defamed the plaintiff, and therefore the plaintiff is entitled to extend the enjoining order. Having heard the submissions of both parties, court extended the enjoining order only valid until the 18th of December 2020, on which date objections of the defendant are to be filed. Mr. Udita Igalahewa, President's Counsel, and attorneys Jeevanta Jayathilaka, Nishkan Parthalingam, Niranjan Arul Prakasam, Damita Karuna Ratna, N.K. Ashokbaran, Miuru Igalahewa, and 7 other counsels appeared for the defendant, instructed by Attorney-at-Law G.G. Arulprakasam. Appearing for the plaintiff was President's Counsel Romesh De Silva and Attorney-at-Law Ruanta Kure. Incidentally, Mr. Kure earlier functioned as the senior-most junior counsel at Mr. Ali Sabri's chambers prior to Mr. Sabri becoming the Minister of Justice. The plaintiff was instructed by Attorney-at-Law Sanath Vijayawardena.
The expenditure heads of several ministries, including Environment, Wildlife and Forest Conservation, were debated in Parliament today. Leader of the Jatika Jana Balawegaya, Anurukumar Dilsanayaka, joined in on the debate, emphasizing the damage that has been caused to the environment.
නියෝජ්‍ය කතානායකතුමනි පෞගිය කාලේ සිද්ධ වෙච්ච සිදුවීම් වාර්තා වූ සිදුවීම් කීපයක්ම එක පෙළට කියාගෙන යන්නම්.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I would like to list some instances that took place in the past that will portray the government's vision and aim for the environment of Sri Lanka. Sand and soil transporting permits were cancelled, and it paved the way for the sand smugglers. Even though sand mining needed permits, by cancelling sand transportation permits, the authorities could not carry out raids to bring the perpetrators before the law. The cleared forest lands in the Vilpattu Forest Reserve were gazetted again. Forest lands were cleared without an environmental report to cultivate aloe vera. 100 acres were destroyed from the Kalaweva Reserve in Anuradhapura for mango cultivation. The 5/2001 Circular of Forest Conservation Act was abolished. By doing so, 500,000 hectares of other state forests in the country were given to district agents and divisional secretariats. That was merely to carry out your projects. Cabinet approval was sought to hand over the Mana Veditalativ Reserve for a company to start a shrimp farm. The Nelluwa-Lankagama Road was broadened without an environmental study. Requests were made for the destruction of 150 acres of forest reserves in Ellalla in the Hambantota district, destroying the Anavilundava Sanctuary, destroying 150 acres of the Rakmane Forest Reserve in Horopatana, destroying 50 acres of Adiyagalahina Reserve in Mahadullapa, torching 100 acres of Valikanda Somavatiya Reserve in Polonnaruwa, destruction of 5,400 acres of the Rambakan Reserve in Ampara for the purpose of handing it over to a company. This is what has been happening for the longest time. All your ministers in charge of forest conservation are criminals. The resources of our country has been more than enough for the people of our country. But there is a group of greedy individuals who cannot have enough of our resources. That is why ministers are building hotels near Kalaweva. This is the sad reality that we have to face. Your development strategy that you have been following for the longest time has to be changed.
While debates regarding the Minister of Environment, Wildlife and Forest Conservation and state ministries were held in Parliament today, a group of dairy farmers from Viharagodaya, Polonnaruwa engaged in a protest. Farmers who brought their cattle to the location engaged in the protest, blocking the Somavati Polonnaruwa main road. The protesters were opposing an incident where cattle barns situated in the Floodplains National Park in Polonnaruwa were damaged yesterday. The protesters dispersed after the Lankapura Divisional Secretary arrived at the scene and promised to provide sustainable solutions to their woes. Last month, the Floodplains National Park figured heavily after a tense argument ensued between State Minister Wimalavira Disanayaka, State Minister Roshan Ranasinghe and several wildlife officials when the minister attempted to allow farmers to release cattle to the land falling under the Floodplains National Park and also to provide land to farmers to cultivate. When wildlife officers opposed the act of releasing cattle to the Floodplains National Park, the State Minister argued that the people's grievances should be given a just solution. A confrontation occurred between the State Minister and wildlife officers at that time. When a group comprising Mahasangha travelled to the Viharagodaya area of the Floodplains National Park yesterday to plant saplings, steps were taken to demolish cattle barns in the area.
ජලගැලුම් නිම්නය මැදින් මේ වෙනකොට පාරක් කපන ලෑස්ති කරලා තියෙනවා.
Plans are afoot to construct a road through the Floodplains National Park. The person who is completely responsible for this is the State Minister, Roshan Ranasinghe, from the Polonnaruwa district. The road is being constructed to run parallel to the stream of the Mahaweli River. There is a sand quarry which is extremely valuable. They are constructing the road focused on that quarry. Once the road is constructed, it will divide the wildlife reserve. The fauna in the area will be disrupted. Biodiversity will be destroyed. Roshan Ranasinghe is using State Minister Vimalavira Disanayake as a pawn in his attempt to construct this road. We should remind the President, the knowledgeable citizens of this country elected you into power and granted you a two-thirds majority in Parliament to protect our resources and national identity. By today, you have forgotten your responsibility. Ministers with no common sense and no knowledge continue to destroy our ecosystems without paying attention to its consequences. If the President loves the country, he should step in and stop this immediately.
ඉතාමත්ම හිතුමතේ වනාන්තර පද්ධති විනාශ කරමින් පවතිනවා. ජනාධිපතිතුමනි ඔබතුමා රටට ආදරේ නම් වහා මේ තත්ත්වය වළක්වීමට කටයුතු සිද්ධ කළ යුතුයි.
Wildlife officers attached to 13 trade unions engaged in an island-wide token strike today, demanding the government to preserve the country's national resources, including the Floodplains National Park in Polonnaruwa. Wildlife officials are engaging in a token strike for the second time, following the confrontation between State Minister Vimalavira Disanayake and wildlife officials. Operations at national parks across the island were not conducted as a result of the strike. Visitors were forced to turn back as ticket counters also remained closed. Prabhash Karnathilaka, the chairman of the All-Island Joint Wildlife Officers Union, said a continuous strike will be launched in the future if the authorities fail to respond to their demands.
While wildlife officials were engaged in a token strike over the actions of State Minister Vimalavira Disanayake, State Minister Vidura Wickramanayake today criticized the actions of the Board of Investment officials. The situation developed as the minister went to inspect the widening of the entrance road to the BOI-owned industrial estate at Wagavatta Horana. State Minister D.V. Chanaka was also present. Locals protested against the widening of the existing road after closing an alternative road.
මේ පාර ගම්සිතියම 1940 ඉඳලා තියෙනවා. දැන් මොකද්ද පාර අරින්න බැරි හේතු? ආයෝජකයෙකුට දීලා කියලා තමයි බියෝ එක කියන්නේ. මේ පාර මේක
Minister, we only need a bridge where the road has been closed. This does not get submerged, but Minister, this gets submerged. They have purposely locked this entrance and put rubber trees here.
Investors should come, but we must think about the people in the village. I will not allow injustice to be done to the people. I will not allow the people's houses to be demolished down this route. So take an alternative route. The BOI is not another government. What happened here was that someone took a cut and shared it. These are the areas where most cancer and respiratory disease patients are reported from. They are always lying, saying that they will solve these problems.
The
previous government gave this land over illegally. We will take legal advice and correct this.
Many have said that they are acquaintances of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. They said that Mahinda Rajapaksa will be coming here soon. We said he will come tomorrow. They built hotels and said the same things. Remember, we want to protect the environment and the lives of the people. We stand for things that benefit the people.
The travel ban imposed on former Minister Basil Rajapaksa was lifted today by the Mathura Magistrates Court.
A travel ban was imposed on Rajapaksa with regard to a case filed under money laundering charges for the purchase of a property in Browns Hill, Mathura. Counsel for Basil Rajapaksa filing a motion in court today requested for the travel ban be lifted. The courts, which considered the facts, ordered for the travel ban to be lifted, which was imposed for a period of 3 months.
The decision on granting bail to former director of the Criminal Investigations Department, SSP Shania Besekara, and Police Inspector Rohana Mendis, which was scheduled for today in Court Number 1 of the Gampaha High Court, was not taken up. The matter was postponed to the 9th of December as High Court Judge Nimal Ranavira was on official leave. Shania Besekara is currently receiving treatment at the IDH for COVID-19 while being in the custody of prison officials. The attorneys representing Police Inspector Rohana Mendis has issued a written request to the Human Rights Commission asking for his client to be moved to the IDH for treatment since he has shown symptoms of COVID-19.
දැන් රජයේ පොදු හතුරා බවට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා ශානි අබේසේකර මහත්තයා.
Shani Abesekara has become the common enemy of the government. What is the mistake he did? He was known as the modern-day Sherlock Holmes. Shani Abesekara has, in a number of cases, uncovered corruption, scandals and murders committed by various members of the governing faction. Are those wrong? They are trying to create an impression among the general public that these were wrong. They are trying to show that he was doing this for revenge. But when he contracted corona while in prison, instead of sending him to the IDH from Mahara, he was sent to Velikanda, so that he has to travel about 500 kilometers to put his life at risk. Today he has been brought to the IDH. Although the Attorney General's department aren't even willing to negotiate his bail application, they are checking now on the status of his health. We believe that they are looking into whether they can keep him imprisoned further. The two other officers who were arrested with him, namely Prematilaka and Mendis, have fallen ill. There is a doubt as to if they too have been infected by COVID-19. They have been subject to a PCR test and they have just been given a Panadol pill. This is being done to seek revenge from them. All we have to say is that this government is seeking revenge from these officers for performing their duties truthfully. They always speak about Shani Abesekara by referring to a phone call made to him by Ranjan Ramanayaka. What did Ranjan Ramanayaka tell him in the phone call? When our leaders were striking deals to suppress these cases, Ranjan Ramanayaka, as a person who speaks the bitter truth, spoke to him and tried to enforce the law properly. It is when he spoke to enforce the law properly that Shani Abesekara responded by saying, "I will wash pots and pans at your home. Please don't get involved in these matters." Shani Abesekara spoke the truth. He said, "Do not get involved in these matters. I will enforce the law properly." Ranjan on one hand attempted to enforce the law that is not being enforced. Shani spoke in support of enforcing the law.
අනිත් උදවියගේ අතින් ක්‍රියාත්මක නොවන නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරවන්න ශානි ඒ වෙනුවෙන් කතා කළා.
Meanwhile, the Samiki Jana Balavegya staged a silent protest opposite the presidential secretariat demanding a stop to oppression. The protest, which was attended by the leader of the opposition Sajid Premadasa, was mainly staged to oppose the incident which occurred at the Mahara prison. It is the duty of this government to ensure that democracy of the country is secured and to further the rule of law and rights and the freedoms of the general public of the country and prisoners. We see this incident at the Mahara prison as a depiction of state suppression and state terrorism. How did this incident begin? Who should be held responsible for it? The government must provide answers to these questions in Parliament, and they must be answerable to the general public in this country.
මේ සිද්ධියට මූල මොකක්ද? කවුද මේකට වග කියන්නට ඕන? ඒ සියලුම කරුණු කාරණා පිළිබඳව රජය රටටත් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවටත් රටේ ජනතාවටත් උත්තර සපයන්නට ඕන.
Main sponsor.
Police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana said 7 bodies of the 11 detainees of the Mahara prison unrest were identified. According to our correspondents, the families of the detainees gathered outside the Mahara prison today as well.
The relatives of the prisoners gathered outside the prison hoping to find out about the status of the inmates at the prison. A spouse of an inmate had also arrived at the prison today to ascertain the whereabouts of her husband, who is an inmate at the Mahara prison.
බැලුව ඇවිත් එතකොටත් හිටියා ඊට පස්සේ තමයි කිසිම ආරංචියක් නැත්තේ ගමෙන් සෙනග කියනවා නැති වෙලා කියලා අපිට විස්තරයක් දැනගන්න විදියකුත් නැහැ රාගම ස්පිරිතාලෙටත් ගියා එතකොට නම් ලිස්ට් එක දාලා තිබ්බා ඒ නම් ලිස්ට් එකේවත් එයාගේ නම තිබ්බේ නැහැ.
The State Minister of Prison Management and Prisoners Rehabilitation, Lohan Ratwatta, emphasizing the present congestion in prisons given the rising numbers of inmates, stated that the government will take measures to reduce the number by at least 8,000.
He made this statement addressing the inaugural meeting of the Ministerial Consultative Committee on Justice, chaired by the Minister of Justice Ali Sabri, in Parliament on Saturday. The State Minister pointed out that there are 28,951 inmates in the 28 prison complexes around the country at present, causing considerable congestion. Accordingly, the Minister stated that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has issued a directive to release inmates who can be granted a pardon, especially given the COVID-19 situation. Accordingly, he stated that as soon as approval is given to the cabinet paper presented by the Ministry of Justice, the 4-year pardon, which has not been granted for nearly 20 years, could be given. Thus, all prisoners under death sentence will have their sentences reduced to 20 years, and those who have served a sentence of more than 20 years will be released. The State Minister also said that the ministry intends to settle minor amounts of bail on behalf of prisoners who are in prison due to their inability to pay it.
Meanwhile, the Committee to Protect Prisoners' Rights lodged a complaint at the Human Rights Commission today. The complaint was lodged regarding the deaths of inmates during the Mahara prison unrest. We had to intervene in this matter when the final rites of the deceased are being done before justice is being served. It is being said in Parliament that according to the old reports, the incident was not a brawl between two groups and a shooting did not take place. We would protest the lies expressed by the subject minister, Lohan Ratwatta, who is hiding behind parliamentary privileges at a situation where a single post-mortem examination has not been conducted.
අර මහර සිද්ධියට අදාළ ඒ ජීවිතක්ෂයට පත්වෙච්ච අය මෘතදේහය තාම මුදහැරලා නැහැ ගරු ඇමතුමනි. තාම අඳුරගෙනත් නැහැ මුදහැරලත් නැහැ. ඉතින් මේක බලවත් අසාධාරණයක්.
හැබැයි ඒක
I think according to the request of the magistrate, it must be done after the post-mortem examination. I have called for an interim report to look into the matter.
Honourable Speaker, there is a major issue here because if the bodies have not been identified since 8 days after the incident, they say documents have been destroyed. However, the officials inside the prison must be aware of the inmates and it won't be an issue to identify them because everyone knows each other. We received information that a brother of a dead inmate is also an inmate and still alive. So 8 days is a long time.
I don't have information regarding the incident at this moment, but it is handled by the judicial medical officer and the magistrate. I will try to carry out the duties in accordance to the law. The committee appointed to investigate the incident surrounding the Mahara prison unrest handed over their interim report to Minister of Justice, President's Counsel Ali Sabri today. A team of 25 police officers under the direction of a superintendent of police from the CID were appointed to investigate the incident. The report was handed over today by the chairperson of the committee, former High Court Judge Kusala Sarojini Veerawardena. We as a government and the Ministry of Justice are obliged to conduct the independent inquiry and obtain a report on the matter. We will conduct an independent inquiry into what happened and present the facts to Parliament and also to the people.
Parliamentarian Sarath Fonseca today responded to a statement made in Parliament recently by Minister of Public Security, retired Rear Admiral Sarath Veerasekara.
He said he was one of the 5 main commanders during the war. The Civil Defence Force is under an executive commander like the STF, but it cannot be compared to the army. We never even allowed him to attend the Security Council meetings. On the Independence Day celebrations, you see the Inspector General of Police and the commanders of the 3 armed forces standing behind the President. The head of the Civil Defence Force cannot come and stand there. When he was speaking about the war, he said that we ended the war. He was never even close enough to hear the sound of gunshots. He said that Miliband and some other people came here during the war and they were turned away by the President. He said that the President didn't allow anyone to interrupt the war. I must remind him this. I am not in any way accusing President Mahinda Rajapaksa of anything under the current state that he is in. I don't want to sling mud at him. But on the 31st of January 2009 and the 1st of February 2009, the government decided to enter into a ceasefire agreement. I disagreed with that. During the ceasefire, the terrorists attacked my soldiers. My troops had to retreat 4 kilometers. I lost about 300 soldiers. That was when the ceasefire was agreed upon. If we were pushed back about 3 more kilometers, just like Mankulama collapsed, we would have lost the war that we fought for 2.5 years. We stood against this at the time and ensured our victory. Sarath Weerasekara doesn't know these details. He is speaking of these matters without having a proper knowledge on these matters. Before he was appointed as the head of the Civil Defence Force, the former Defence Secretary and the current President spoke to me. I was the one who asked for him to be appointed as he did not have any employment. He said that the glory of the war victory must be given to politicians. What a shameful statement. I have never in my life heard a man in uniform handing the glory of a war victory to politicians. The reason for this statement was the fact that he was never even close enough to hear the sound of a gunshot. He has never faced a gunshot. So he must be thinking that the glory of their war victory must go to politicians. The glory that is due to the army must be given to them. That is why our soldiers sacrificed their lives. He doesn't understand the value of that. In concluding his address, I am even ashamed to say this, but he said that the TNA must be proscribed. Prescribing the TNA would strip the people in the north of their democratic rights. He is not the Minister of Public Security for the south. He is the Minister of Public Security to the south, the north, the Sinhalese, Tamils and the Muslim communities. MPs Sumandiran and Sambandhan have never stirred racism. They spoke on behalf of the people. Even we are speaking on behalf of the people. Because someone speaks on behalf of their people, if someone is unwise enough to call that political party to be proscribed, he must first learn a lesson from our experiences in the past before he speaks about public security. He must not forget what public security is, what the people's rights are, and that we have a right to protect the fundamental rights of the people.
Welcome back. The government has decided to hold the GCE ordinary level examination, which was postponed due to COVID-19 from the 1st of March to the 11th of March next year.
We have decided to hold the ordinary level exam from the 1st of March to the 11th of March next year, adhering to health guidelines. Approximately 5,000 examination centres are needed to carry out the exam island-wide. We will provide the necessary health equipment for all those centres. We are hoping to analyse the health situation of the country once every 2 weeks. We also hope to reopen all schools across the island adhering to health guidelines. We have only reopened 5,100 schools thus far. There is a total of 10,165 schools in the country.
Now, another 326 COVID-19 cases were identified today, while another 344 COVID-19 recoveries were reported. The total number of recoveries in the country currently stands at 20,804. As of today, the total number of COVID-19 cases reported from the island rose to 28,203. 7,259 active patients are currently under medical supervision. 140 COVID-19 fatalities were confirmed as at last evening, with no further deaths being reported so far today. And a short while ago, we received a report that 377 new cases have been found in the island. In more news here at home, while there are news reports surfacing that the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka will be abolished, many factions are coming forward to speak against it. Former Minister Milinda Muragoda, tabling the Public Utilities Commission bill in Parliament in the year 2002, had cited the legislation as a requirement to protect the people while offering high-quality utility services.
Speaking in Parliament on the 8th of October in 2002, the former minister had pointed out that the bill would regulate investments that are received by the water and electricity industries. He had observed that the bill would be aimed at using the country's resources wisely, efficiently and economically through a Public Utilities Commission that operates across ministry lines. Muragoda insisted that the PUCSL would act independently without working towards the interests of a particular industry, while also contributing to the idea of transparency. He had also stressed that the Commission would prevent arbitrary decisions from being taken with little or no relation to market forces or market prices. Accordingly, the former Economic Reforms Minister had argued that setting up the PUCSL would ultimately contribute to the country's economic recovery and sustain economic growth. He had also observed that several analytical studies carried out by leading local experts have reiterated the need for an independent regulatory commission in the country.
Victoria's hotel quarantine program has restarted, with Melbourne Airport welcoming its first international flights in more than 5 months.
Sri Lankan Airlines flight UL604 from Colombo landed today, the first of 8 international passenger flights carrying 253 travellers due to touchdown today. Victoria has not accepted international flights since early July, when it was revealed a number of hotel quarantine workers had contracted COVID-19 from guests. The outbreaks went on to spark the state's second wave, which resulted in more than 18,000 infections and 800 deaths. The state has since recorded 38 consecutive days without a new COVID-19 case.
Up next is a short commercial break. Stay with News First.
Do your online shopping now with Sambole.lk to get it home delivered or pick up on your way.
Sambole.lk.
Emergency authorization has been sought for the use of Pfizer and Oxford AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccines in India, following the lead of the UK and Russia.
The Serum Institute of India, the world's largest vaccine producer by volume, sought emergency authorization in the country for Oxford AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine. The move came close to the heels of Pfizer applying for a similar authorization of its coronavirus vaccine in India on the 5th of this month. India has reported more than 9.57 million COVID-19 cases, the world's second highest after the United States, with nearly 140,000 deaths. Vaccines have started to arrive at hospitals ahead of what the NHS has termed the largest ever vaccine rollout in the UK history. Frontline health staff, people over the age of 80 and care home workers will be the first to get the COVID-19 vaccine. To speed the process, Britain's Medicine and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency had its experts review vaccine data as it became available, and separate teams worked in parallel on different parts of the process rather than one waiting for another to finish. In England, 50 hospitals have been initially chosen to serve as hubs for administrating the vaccine.
As Chinese authorities attempt to rewrite history by claiming the coronavirus started overseas, one state media outlet has suggested it may have arrived via imported frozen food from countries including Australia.